Hi everyone, welcome to Paradise. As of today's date, it is the 9th of July 2022. I'm a free man with a clear criminal record. It's true, I do know Kathy Freeman. Anyway, I can't work and I'm homeless. I've damaged my brain and that was from a violence of neglect. I can't feel my feet due to a suicide attempt that occurred from systemic oppression. What do you do when you're this infamous? Even if I was evil, which is the myth, what would a society do to this collectively to victimise me as a person in the way that it has? You see, I'm a failed whistleblower at IBAC, at APRA, at ASIC and the Commonwealth Ombudsman. I'm in great danger of reprisal. And so far, I've experienced zero equality before the law and no access to it. I've had zero justice in any of my issues. In fact, I've not only just been innocuously ignored, yet pointedly victimised and systemically oppressed by proxy attack, which affects my finances. To the point of me, after the elaborate persecution for so long, which led me to the loss of my job, complicated by illness, to being incarcerated, and further, attempting suicide within a public hospital, for which there was no outcome. After I survived the suicide attempt, which was deemed fatal in the Freedom of Information documents, I was pumped full of blood and rejected from the hospital and forsaken by everyone. This was via prejudice, stigma and shame. My blood family, all friends and supporters from the system, who without hesitation, they all refused to cross the floor or confront their boss regarding the oppression that nearly killed me and then was covered up. It was covered up by the exact same system that caused the conditions, and it was an elongated violence of neglect, and it's made by the federal government. Well, it's true, I have done drugs, and I have now, I think, a brain impairment. I know with this brain what it remembers and how I speak. Apparently, I have a mental illness that I could be categorised with by the sane people as having delusions of persecution, for which the government medicates me via force. The delusions are pretty real. This is despite my first exit notes after that incarceration from the psychiatric hospital Werribee Mercy from Dr. Lagrasso, which clearly state I am neither delusional nor psychotic, and in fact, I am grossly aware. The diagnosis given to me pre and post that of psychosis is absolutely wrong. The diagnosis given at that time by Dr. Lagrasso was more correctly adjustment disorder. Recent incarceration in Werribee Mercy Hospital, thanks cops for shackling me like a criminal and putting me in the back of a divvy van. I was diagnosed as psychotic and delusional in my beliefs, and now the state has sanctioned me to be force-fed medication I disagree with, and many psychiatrists would disagree with, framed by the evidence in this video. It is a misdiagnosis. It is absolutely unequivocally incorrect, and I object to it. The hospital should be held account. In addition to that, just briefly while I was in there, I was violently beaten up. Gee, wonder why. See, the funny thing is, the moment you say my former partner, Stefan Isonides, is a former ASIO agent, and the Office of Prime Minister and Cabinet refused my freedom of information, and I can't report crime to police, and I've been unable to get a lawyer in all these years, and I'm a banned whistleblower, let's just say that rational paranoia is a little bit of column A and it's a little bit of column B. The Office of Prime Minister and Cabinet Freedom of Information may have intervened in what has simply become a conspiracy to destroy me, discredit me, set me up to fail, ruin my reputation, my business, my intellectual property, my personal and digital identities, destroy any opportunities I may have, blaspheme me with stigma, and in very basic short language, aid and abet my death. The thing is, society's never fond of truth speakers, light workers, the avant-gardes, and the ones who seek equity, justice and dignity, or are the forebearers of new realisations born of being the revolutionaries or the mystics. You see, no one likes a smart ass, and it's an Australian sport to cut down the high poppy. But no one likes someone too smart, or too dumb, or too mad, or not mad enough. And depending on who has the money, I'm rendered absolutely all of those things. I've been forsaken in the world. I've been grateful for the support I have received, for the people that wanted to give. And but really, there's rarely been a person who has supported me long term and authentically and with my honest issues, especially framed by the taboo of death and suicide. That taboo is very close. This is especially true as a survivor of torture perpetuated systemically, as this statement clearly demonstrates with the evidence. This statement is backed up with facts and vast collections of communications and documented evidence. Not one of those not being the rejection of my freedom of information from the highest man in the land, the Office of Prime Minister and Cabinet, which could untangle this heinous and complex scapegoating persona that I have become, and an infamous vagrant now suffering great detriment through the violence of neglect. See, this is what my prosecution needs to prove a conspiracy to pervert the course of justice and lay charges in the High Court of Australia. It simply needs to prove beyond reasonable doubt that the offence of perverting the course of justice is contained in Section 319 of the Crimes Act 1900, which states that a person who does any act or makes any omission intending in any way to pervert the course of justice is liable for imprisonment for 14 years. To find a person guilty of this offence, my prosecution in the High Court must prove each of the following matters beyond a reasonable doubt: that the accused did an act or made an omission, and that they did so with the intent to pervert the course of justice. That is it. I just want to say that public officials who are aware of this video, you are obliged to act within the Charter of Human Rights of a person with a disability, ratified by the Australian Government in 2008, and not identify yourself as liable that you acted with intent to pervert the course of justice. If you are a public official watching this video and witnessing this evidence, it is incumbent upon you to take it higher to authorities. This is my day. Really though, no one could have foreseen this coming. But here we are. So here we go. Excuse me. The charities that I want to donate to, and the beneficiaries of the detriment, many millions of dollars that I'm owed, and I will bloody well get, is not that I'm greedy or an extortionist. It's because I just want a simple life free from oppression and death threats. I want to be able to have equality before the law and human worth and dignity reinstated systemically, and I will be apologised to. The following people and organisations are places that I've identified myself through my research with my PhD as places where I'll start locally and measurably to support. The Lord Smith Animal Hospital, the Lost Dogs Home, Ethical AI Australia, the Banksia unit. Propose a system, the Banksia unit, child and adolescent mental health at the Royal Children's Hospital gets a yell. The Australian Republic movement. I'm going to sponsor select artists who I know in the community and who I value their work. I may support the Chapel of Sacred Mirrors, which is Alex Gray over in the US. I'm going to support Bush Heritage Australia for the Indigenous knowledge of the plants, the biggest chemist we'll ever have. I'm going to support Zoos Victoria, even though I don't agree with caging animals, but the contact between animals and humans is important. Socialist Alliance, I'm going to donate to. I'm going to donate to the Sexual Assault Crisis Line, sacl.com.au. First Nations Acknowledgement, antar.org.au. As a cancer survivor or liver, I'm going to donate to the Cancer Council. I'm going to donate to the gayswitchboard.org.au. And I'm going to donate to NAVA, visualarts.net.au, good place for artists. I'm going to donate to onetreeplanted.org. And also with my research in post-human technologies, Melbourne Deep Learning Group, mdlg.ai. That's a list of the places I'm going to start siphoning some of this detriment to. In exchange, could you just share this video? Cheers. What have you done lately for society, eh? A lot of people sell their soul to the highest bidder, which is fine, to recreate the situations with their parents were born into, house, kids, that kind of stuff. I'm not like that. I'm a bit of a heretic. And all I've really done is to help others, share an authentic story, and which I was exploited for later in life, and also ask for help. And this video is still asking for help, and I will get it. There is a collective gaslighting that is in opposition to the dignity and worth I have as an implied human being. And just because you don't understand me does not necessarily make me crazy. It makes you deficient in my perceptions, expressions, and my existentialism. I have to reel it in to be able to communicate systemically and with many. I know what conceited people and public officials in places of privilege think. They think I'm weak. In actual fact, you will never know the strength it takes to be a heretic and an individual and be a little bit punk about things, and absolutely do it your own way. And you have to do so getting up every day, and you have to face a world that is foaming at the arse for your death. Now, I ask all those people in positions of privilege and prosperity, held together by nepotism with the other rich people and the people in places of political privilege, how do you rate your cowardice at the moment? Because I've dealt with many public officials clearly stating human rights abuses, and each one of them has acted in congruency with towing the political party line, which is to delay, defer, deny, and deflect. I think it is the height of cowardice to send an email without your name on it, to represent the facade of a movement paid by people with money to protect people with money, to exploit someone who is easily targeted and easily scapegoated and framed because he has a brilliant sense and a hugely authentic way of expressing himself and the world he lives in. There's no doubt about it. What has occurred to me, and has until this day, is wrong. What has occurred is systemic. It's from local to state to federal government, and it's not the invention of me. It comes from systemic other places. It is far from my creation. It is unjust to discriminate against me because of perceived character flaws, my sexual orientation, or illness, including mental illness or cancer. To systemically and via a government agency set someone up to fail again and again to aid and abet their death is a bloody awful thing, and it's gutless. It's a cowardly act that is so audacious in its conceitedness that it takes an unlearned implied prosperity and power to dismiss or reject or omit one single person. That is shit. That's a shit thing to do to someone. And you know what? Those people that are towing the party line to aid and abet my destruction, whilst they're protecting their own money, power, and privilege, and places of parliament, and the way they live their lives, like, what gutless coward you are. You'll never know how tough it takes and the resilience and strength it takes to get to where I am now. You know what? Those kind of people demonstrate no critical thinking, no individualism, and a contempt for uniqueness, whilst obeying, the wage from the tyranny, the government tyranny, that is elongating my suffering. And each one of those sticks in the faggot of oppression have aided and abetted my death, and they still do to this day, and they are holding the fort. There is a huge well of hatred towards me, but, I'm pretty chipper. I'm alright. But I just want to say, this conspiracy to pervert the course of justice, which is clearly demonstrable below, elongates my suffering, and it is illegal. Victimisation is illegal. It is plain wrong that I cannot report many crimes to police or authorities. It is a human rights abuse not to have equity before the law or access to it. It is abhorrent public officials, again in positions of power and privilege, get to be the arbiter of my prosperity who have rendered my vagrancy. The rule of law exists, and if it exists for one, it exists for all. Now, when that exists, I can prosecute in the High Court for the many who have redacted my wealth and prosperity and did so via an easily demonstrated evidence via omission, rejection, or ignoring me, or kicking the can down the road, delay, defer, deny. I can absolutely prove this movement over years as clear as a bell. Did you know there's such a thing such as the CDDC scheme for defective administration, which is defined as a specific and unreasonable lapse in complying with existing administrative procedures, or an unreasonable failure to institute appropriate administrative procedures, or an unreasonable failure to give to or for an applicant the proper advice that was within the officer's power and knowledge to give, or reasonably capable of being obtained by the officer to give. That includes the Charter of Human Rights for a person with a disability. This goes also to giving advice to or for an applicant that was in all circumstances incorrect or ambiguous. What is detriment? Detriment means quantifiable financial loss that the applicant has suffered. Now, there are three types of detriment. Detriment relating to personal injury, including mental injury, that's personal injury loss. The economic detriment that is not related to personal injury, pure economic loss. And the detriment relating to damage to property. Who can apply? Anyone can. How do I apply? I have applied. Now, I've addressed the criteria for the defective administrations to the former Federal Finance Minister, to the Office of Prime Minister and Cabinet, and to the Federal Police. I explained why the inactions by these people were defective, including the evidence of recordings that I simply cannot report crime to police, and it's covered up. Apparently all claims are considered, but I have been unable to gain some prosperity through detriment from this government, and it's abhorrent. The types of compensation that the CDD scheme can do is when they are a financial loss with a direct connection to their actions that lead to a finding of legal liability or defective administration. They can be fees where evidence. Yeah. Thing is, if I've got a problem with the CDDA scheme, I've got to go to the Commonwealth Ombudsman. But they've already rejected me as a whistleblower. So I'm going around in circles. Actually, the rule of law does not apply to me. I don't know. A little bit specifically to the Attorney General, Mr. Mark Dreyfus. Under his portfolio, not that the other Attorney General helped me at all, his role as the Attorney General is some of the following things that I thought applied to me: administrative support for royal commissions and certain other inquiries, copyright, fraud and anti-corruption policy, freedom of information. Hello, the OAIC has rejected me so many times. And law and justice. Clearly this is a case. That includes administrative law, alternative dispute resolution, bankruptcy. Well, I'm bankrupt. I didn't have to go bankrupt. I shouldn't have had to. Constitutional law, courts and tribunals, human rights. Where am I? Law reform, legal assistance. You wouldn't think of it. Legislative drafting, marriage and family law. Hello, Steve Isonides. Personal property securities. It goes on. These are all things that are extremely relevant to me, my situation, and I do fear that via blowing the whistle on this story, that I will be either incarcerated against my will or framed for a crime I haven't done. I have serious fears for my murder. This little bit to the Honourable Bill Shorten about the NDIS Code of Conduct for the Minister as the head of the NDIS, and my responsibility as a registered provider and employee of the government in the NDIA as a therapeutic support, or formally in reporting abuse and neglect of a person with a disability. It is absolutely mandatory, and I do it implied in this whole message today. The NDIS Code of Conduct and the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with a Disability that Australia is a signatory to is embedded in that principle. 77 point says violence, abuse, neglect and exploitation is broadly understood to include, but is not limited to, domestic, family and interpersonal violence, physical and sexual violence and abuse, psychological or emotional harm and abuse, constraints, forced treatments and interventions, humiliation and harassment, financial abuse, violations of privacy, systemic abuse, physical and emotional neglect, passive neglect and willful deprivation. All of those things, sadly, I've had to come to terms with and deal with. And it's abhorrent, and it needs to be acknowledged, and it needs to be ledgered, and it needs to be public and transparent, and it needs to be reported, and that's what I'm doing today, because you got to speak in love, beauty and compassion, but sometimes there's an ugly side to life, and it needs to be aired. As a registered provider, I'm required to implement and maintain an incident management system to identify, assess, manage and resolve incidents that occur during the course of delivering NDIS supports or services and pose a risk of harm to people with a disability. Additionally, as a provider, I must report the most serious of these incidents to the NDIS Commission, which I have actually done, as reportable incidents. They are defined in the NDIS 2013 as the death of a person with a disability. What about a near death? A serious injury of a person with a disability? Abuse or neglect of a person with a disability. I am both a registered provider and I am a participant of the NDIS. and I hold towards the NDIS Code of Conduct and always have. And that little section was for the attention of Mr. Shorten. Of registered NDIS providers like me who loved his job and was exploited and injured out of it, I had to ensure or immediately report incidents to do with criminal acts of violence, abuse, neglect, or exploitation if it occurs or is alleged even to the relevant authorities and police. I must notify the NDIS Commission about reportable incidents, and I must act swiftly to involve the police and the NDIS Commission. I must fully comply and cooperate with any investigative actions taken by the NDIS Commission or other relevant authorities, including the police. Now consider, after this video has aired, that my issues with systemic injustice, a conspiracy to pervert the course of justice, the vile victimisation and exploitation of me as a person with a disability and a registered provider has now been aired and reported. There are obviously some key stakeholders supporting this movement to oppress and deny me justice, and I'm going to name two of them now. One is Steve Isonides, former employee of ASIO, who goes by Stefan or Stefan, depending on his tax status and his ABN lookup. He changed it in 2012 or 13, just before he exploited me and left me homeless with his dying dog. Now, we were engaged for over 5 years, and there is an equal, legal, and equitable settlement that needs to occur. He exploited me financially, sexually, drugged me, and I've got all the evidence. I found it on the computer. And further to that, he admitted to me that he was a drug dealer, he was present at murders, and just before I was incarcerated the first time, as if an attack by proxy from afar, I whistle blew on my website here, and I he's underpinning a lot of this. Now, I don't have evidence that he was present at a murder, but I've got no details. And I can't report this. I have been unable to report this ever to police. Now, to that, he's in a silent space right now. He is really going quiet. I got one supposedly anonymous message from him on my website, which said, "Prove it or I'll report you to the authorities, blah, blah, blah." So he's obviously running scared, and he's protecting one thing: the money. Well, you know what? I have worth, value, and dignity, and he exploited me for 5 years. I lived on a disability pension, and I dubbed myself in a Centrelink, and I dubbed the relationship in a Centrelink to be authentic and more equal in the eyes of the law, even though marriage was not allowed at that time. Now, there's the black and white to every relationship, but basically I was forced, or he told me to live on the pension while he worked for a company, and then Apple with Steve Jobs, and then with what's his name, David Irvine at ASIO, earning big money, feathering his own nest. And when I reported the relationship to Centrelink, as I am ethically supposed to do, which is a little bit late, fair on my behalf, but he demanded I go back on it because he couldn't afford to keep us. Why? He came up with this elaborate story that he'd invested the sale of a house he made from cocaine on an illegal offshore tax haven. He sold it for over $1 million. That's jail time, mate. And you owe me money. And that's causing my detriment. He's running scared that I'm going to speak. And I just did. And in addition to that, he told me, he used to try and bribe me with money. I'm not even money orientated. Look at my house. I'm quite chipper here. But you know what? Just for shits and giggles, I'm going to get half of what half of what he has in his assets, in what he owns, everything. And you know what? I'm going to do it just out of a point. Because you know what? He never let me fuck him. So I'm going to fuck him now. The other key person I want to name has to do with I record things. I'm a kooky guy. I recorded something for my own sanity because I had reported I was suicidal to a doctor for a long time. And just before our wedding, I was playing on my phone, press record, forgot about it. His lawyer, when I moved house after my friend Nathan's suicide, and I overdosed from the grief, not from mental illness, from grief. He got a lawyer involved in my complaint, and after I moved, I went to Susie's place, and I decided to articulate it because ethics is important to me. And I just wanted an acknowledgement that the tragedy has happened because my life is valuable to me, believe it or not, people. I don't kill myself for fun and shit to giggles. It was... Now, his lawyer is a man called Mr. Ball of Ball and Partners. Mr. Ball just simply said to me, kept kicking the can down the road, Health Complaints Commissioner, blah, 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 said, just get a lawyer to engage me on a legal level. Well, I didn't know that now Mr. Ball sits on the Australian legal bar. He's an A1 lawyer in this country. He has a lot of political privilege and billions of dollars. And he has an enormous influence on the Australian Ombudsman and also informs government policy. What kind of a chance do you think I've got with this behemoth of a man when I'm just some dude ringing up Slater and Gordon when my ID and number is already forewarned to them not to engage with? This is a preposterous and cowardly hiding behind money, and it's hiding and protecting people who could have got a simple atonement and who I protected, and now it's gone out of control. Now, I only found out after I'd survived my suicide attempt in Werribee Mercy Hospital in February 2021 that my Freedom of Information from APRA details that Mr. Ball had internally framed me as an extortionist because I had a recording. The only reason I remembered it is because I had a recording. And to that was then followed through by these agencies. So there's the Health Complaints Commissioner, APRA, NHPOPC, the police, IBAC, the Victorian Inspectorate, and the Ombudsman. Hello. I didn't stand a chance. I speak today because I can, and I speak because it's ethical, and I object to people in positions of money and conceited privilege of power with audacity and more front than Myers to exploit vulnerable and or disabled people. The opposite of not acting with this video to lodge and align my complaints and my evidence with a detrimental and litigation and equal access before authorities and with litigation or the High Court and with federal authorities and throughout the system with an apology is that it will kill me. It'll kill me. Without people, love, a place to stay, food, I'll be dead. And you all are acutely and consciously aware that this movement of oppression and injustice is occurring. Sadly, people and human beings are prone to believing gossip, libel, and slander, no matter if there's truth to it or not. I mean, even the doctor thing before, even if I was an extortionist and went in there to to record him, set him up to do something. Like, I'd have to be him to talk his words. Like, I'd have to then go through the process of going back to that doctor and moving house and forgetting about it, and then finding the suicide note, for which there's evidence, which mentions that, the doctor, and the other inconsistencies in my treatment. And then go through with an elaborate sadomasochistic desire to top myself. Like, that's absurd. That's the most absurd thing I've ever heard. And it's the same time as that little conspiracy to pervert the course of justice, which Mr. Ball framed me with internally to government agencies, which is a conspiracy to pervert the course of justice. I was given $100,000 by my own old landlord, Mark Eng. Met him one day. He said he saw my drawings, he saw my advocacy, he had some similar issues, and he gave me $100,000 to thank me for my work and fuck off my former partner. I don't know what was behind that. I just accepted it. So, next thing you know, it's a mistake. He wants back. So I gave it to him. And that's how much of an extortionist I am. I don't so much have faith in the system, and I don't have much faith in people. People are inherently prejudiced and prone to gossip and libel and slander and judgment. But there's only one entity that does that really well, and they're ultimately forgiving. So I try not to hold it in my behest, but I'm actually quite a chipper dude, just with my dog and my simple life. And I've put up with a lot. I've suffered enormously. I've been exploited for my vulnerability. I've been taken advantage of, and framed. I can't. An additional thing. I can't speak. I object to this medication being taken, and I can't get off that train. I am not a delusional person. I have a wider range of overlap of what is real and what is unreal, what is faction, what is fiction. However, that does not define me as needing to take mind-numbing medications sanctioned by the state via psychiatrists and cops who oppress and re-traumatize me by taking me to hospital. I am not suicidal. I rarely ever am. And when I am, it's because of one thing and one thing only. It was either grief or it was the frustrations with the incredible and obtuse, abhorrent, vile victimization that was done by proxy over many, many years, which I tried to gain traction for to honour my own person. And the opposing force was systemic, it was generic, it was gutless, and I oppose it because I speak. And you can't stop me, and you can't take my soul. Finally, this evil movement, this conspiracy to pervert the course of justice, has robbed me at the very height of high noon from any prosperity, compensation, from detriment, conciliation, avenue for complaint or litigation, insurance, or money that has been, is, or will be owing to me. I currently have nothing, but I matter. See, the thing is, I don't even want millions of dollars. In fact, I've got cancer, and that's untreated at the moment. I've also got a mental illness, a brain injury. I'm bound to look after my dog in a spiritual contract that is personal to me. All the rest of the litigation and detriment owed to me, which will be paid, is going to go to charities. And it's going to go into a fund, and it's going to help marginalised people. You see, elongating this oppression causes me immediate detriment and risk of death via potential suicide, or which I'm not suicidal, by the way, so don't come and get me. or death post vagrancy. I am next to being on the street and have not paid rent in 5 months. My income is $1,400 a month, and my rent is $1,646 a month. Now, 18 months ago was the suicide attempt. I was dumped after that. My family couldn't acknowledge it. No one stood up for me. The world had forsaken me. And that was very sad, I thought.